Welcome, welcome, welcome to another installment of Wandering Wednesday. I am Michelle with Fun in Key West, and I hope you're having a great week so far. Today, and all Wednesdays, we wander around outside of Key West and the Florida Keys and we go exploring. And today, we're doing something a little different. This has been absolutely on my bucket list, and I am hoping I get to do this year. If not, I'm fingers crossed I can do it next year. But the quick question is, how far is it to Havana from Key West? The quick answer is it's a 90-minute flight. And so you can fly into Cuba from Key West, and there's a lot of things that you can plan around, and you can do some excursions and all of that. But I thought I would focus today on something that didn't take all of the time and the all of the things that you need to do to plan for a 10 or 14-day trip. I have a friend of mine who travels to Havana and Cuba and explores the island and has been multiple times, and she's a fabulous photographer. And so she goes on one of the cultural expeditions and spends 10 plus days exploring. But I thought, you know what? I don't know if I'm ready to do that. But here's the really cool thing. Did you know that you could take a day trip to Havana from Key West? Think about that. That's cool. You leave early in the morning, you spend all day, you get the tour of Cuba, and then you get to come back. Today I'm going to explore how and what I know about it, and I have not done this. If you have done this, let me know. Hey, Michelle, this has been the most fabulous trip I've ever been on. Or, oh my goodness, I would never do it again. So, why take a day trip? I think it's that exposure. It's like when you go on a cruise and you get to stop in a port and spend 4 or 8 hours. You just get a taste and say, you know what? I could spend some more time there, and I want to plan to come back. To me, that's what a day trip to Havana seems like. It gives me exposure to those iconic places that we see all the time on the Travel Channel and on the YouTube and the Facebook. I'm going to do old school there. But I think it's really cool. And there is such a historical connection between Key West and Cuba. And we know all the stories and we see it every day as we continually see Cubans trying to come across those waters and try to get to the United States. And there's that connection and all of those things that link us, the Key West to Cuba. And to me, it would just be really cool to take that trip from Key West, because if you imagine back, you had Henry Flagler who came in, put in the railroad, and his intention was to finish that railroad and then have that ferry boat that took you then over to Cuba, to Havana, and then back. So there's this whole historical connection. And to me, it would just be very exciting to take that trip from Key West over to Cuba. And there's all these nostalgic influences. You have Hemingway and all of those connections. And to me, it's like, oh, I just want to start at the birthplace and go there. And like I said earlier, it's a relatively short flight. It's about, 90 minutes. So it's not an all day commitment in terms of airfare. So you're going to show up and do some really cool things in Havana for the day just to get that little taste of what it's going to be like. Again, I haven't done this, but there are several tour operators in Key West that offer day flights to Havana, and I'll provide some information about that if you're interested. But they handle all of the logistics. They handle how you get there. That's usually a private charter, and they usually fly out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You have to have a passport, and they help you get the visa that you're going to need so that you can visit and land and go through customs in Cuba. But they handle all of the logistics. That's one of the other reasons why I think a day trip to Havana through one of these operators would be interesting, is because they take care of all of the logistics. But if you wanted to do a trip later or a longer trip, you've already been there. You've already been through it, and you get those ideas. So there are private charters that fly out of Key West International Airport and they fly into Havana. And there's usually a minimum number of passengers because of these private planes, but there's always a maximum number. I think these private charters, I think they can take up to 10 people, but I think that's interesting to note. So if you have a larger group, you may not be able to do it all. But again, this is where you call them, you talk to them, and you get all the specifics that are key to you on how to do that. You're going to want to make sure that you book at least 48 hours in advance because they need to process all of that paperwork to make sure that you can get through customs. They do have some online bookings, but again, if it were me, and I've never done this before, I'm planning to call and talk to them and walk through that. So that's my thought. There's this whole thing about how you fly and time and all of that. But what I find is really interesting is you're going to be in a smaller plane, and I think the views from the water to me, because as I fly in to Key West from Miami or Fort Lauderdale, and you're flying in those smaller airplanes, I always find that you're flying a little bit lower and you just get that vibe and that feel so much sooner than when you're coming in on the commercial jet from like out of Charlotte or wherever. And what I really want to emphasize is on these day trips, you have tour operators that are there to handle anything and everything that comes up. And the US tour operators will usually hand you over to a Cuban based tour operation once you land. And so you get the best of both worlds. They're going to help with that, answer questions about US Customs and the TSA security lines, and they'll be able to tell you how long probably you can expect, considering the fact that these are day trips. You're not having a lot of luggage. You're coming in, they've already got everything kind of pre-set up. I can't imagine that TSA is very long. When you go online and look at their itineraries, they don't allow a whole lot of time to come through TSA. What can you expect on a Havana day trip? Again, this is just me reiterating what I've learned in conversations I've had, but if you have done this, I really want to hear about this. But Air Key West is one that offers flights, and not only do they offer the Havana day trips, but they also offer direct flights to Cuba, and they can work all through that. You just want to make sure that you have taken into account how you can get to Cuba, all your visas, and all of that. So I am going to look at my notes here. So what's interesting is here's how that day goes. You arrive at Key West International Airport about 7:15 in the morning, it says. And then you depart around 8 a.m. You're taking a private flight, so it's a smaller jet. You arrive at, and as I go through this, and if I butcher all of the names, please be kind. I did not take Spanish in high school. I took French, and I still don't know French, so bear with me. But you arrive at Marti International Airport in Havana, and there you meet your guide. You go through the TSA and all of that. And then once you're all settled in, you depart the airport there, and you travel to Finca Vaiga, which is Ernest Hemingway's home, and which is now a museum in Havana. And then you also get to visit his boat. So you get to visit the Pilar, and it is registered to Key West. And I think that would, to me, would be really fascinating and cool to see the boat sitting in Cuba, but it's registered into Key West. And then you're going to visit the fishing village of Cojamar, and that's where Hemingway would depart on his fishing expeditions when he was in town and in Havana or in Cuba. And then you would head over and have lunch at the Paladar, and that's a privately owned restaurant there in town. And then you're going to visit and go through on a walking tour of Old Town Havana. And you're going to hit the Hemingway literary marks because, these tours have to adhere to certain standards. They have to be educational or improve on the Cuban people experience. And so these have to have certain things within their itinerary to make that. So one of the places that they plan to stop at is the Ambos Mundos Hotel, where Hemingway frequented. And it's also maintained as a museum. So that would be interesting to see what they've kept and if they didn't updated anything at all. And then you're going to go to La Boguitita de Medio, and that's a restaurant and bar that was favored a lot by Hemingway and other writers and poets of the time. And of course, you're going to go to the La Floridita, which supposedly is where the daiquiri was invented, especially and probably for Hemingway himself, because the rumor has it and the story behind the daiquiri is he didn't like sweet drinks. And so they worked on creating a daiquiri that isn't sweet and that Hemingway enjoyed. So if you have a Hemingway daiquiri, it is nothing like a daiquiri that you think it should be. And then you get a chance to shop and explore, and you get to go down that famous view of the street, and you've got the buildings and the old cars. And to me, this just sounds like a whole absolute lot of fun. And then you meet your driver and you head back to the airport. You fly out around 5 p.m. and you arrive back in Key West for 6 p.m. And depending on time of year, you'd be back in time for sunset. So you leave at sunrise, you're back in Key West by sunset. And then you can run down to Sloppy Joe's and Captain Tony's and do a toast to Hemingway and really say that, you know what, I did the full circle. So I am going to do the best I can on answering some frequently asked questions or common concerns that probably some of you have in your head, because these are the ones that came up to me is how long does the trip take? Like I said, it's about a 90-minute flight from Key West to Havana. And the whole, just a 1 day event. So you're leaving around 7-ish in the morning and you're coming in about 6 o'clock at night. So it's about 11 hours. There are additional expenses that you may incur, and they do say that on their websites and in their itineraries, depending on what comes up. Just be flexible. This isn't probably a once in a lifetime event, or it's an adventure that you do every year, whatever it is, just to put a note. I'm just going for the adventure. I'm not 100% sure about all of the refund of the ticket prices and their policies, but be sure if you have any concerns or questions that you note and have those questions answered before you book. I can't tell you how many times when we were running a travel agency that people would book things and then they were like, I can't do this. And then we had to figure out how to maybe not get them a refund, but get them a credit. And it's just know those policies ahead of time. And know any additional seats or costs that are required or allowed, because again, some of these charters are very limited. I hope I've intrigued you a little bit. This is absolutely one of those things that is on my bucket list. I do want to do a day trip over to Havana just to say I started in Key West and then I went over to Havana and spent the day and got to have a Hemingway daiquiri, got to see the old cars, got to explore Old Town Havana, got to see Hemingway's boat and his house and just walk the streets that Hemingway walked and be able to hopefully have some really cool pictures that I can then share when I come back. Let me know, is this something that has been on your bucket list, or is this something like, hey, I didn't even know we could do this? Let me know. Put it in the comments, DM me, say, hey, Michelle, this is something I really think we should explore and love to have more information. I hope that this was a unique spin on Wandering Wednesday, and I hope you have a great week so far. You've had a great week so far, and that the rest of your week is absolutely spectacular. And if you are planning a trip to Key West, please, please, please head over to FunInKeyWest.com, grab our newsletter. And how do you grab our newsletter? Well, click on the bottom of our footer there and grab a copy of our happy hour guide. That gets you on our newsletter. If you can't find it or really need another link to get onto our newsletter, you just let me know and I will send it to you. You're going to be kept up to date on things that are happening in Key West, things that we talk about every week, and anything new and exciting that we think you should know. And we give you links to the ability to book tours, to figure out places, maybe new places to eat or drink, or maybe new places to explore to stay when you are in Key West. I hope you are planning a fabulous trip to Key West this week or this year. And if you are, we have all the resources over there. So again, FunInKeyWest.com. You guys have a great day, and we will talk to you tomorrow.